Russians torture prisoners of war in Ukraine, that's a fact. They don't care who you are or where you come from. For them, nationality means nothing. Ukrainian or British soldier or civilian, it's all the same. Humanity and law mean nothing to the Russian occupier. My guest today knows this all too well. He's a former soldier of the Royal British Regiment who joined the Ukrainian Marines and fought in Mariupol. He was captured by Russian forces and spent almost 6 months in captivity. Welcome, Shaun Pinner. Shaun, it's a great honor and pleasure to have you here in our studio.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Shaun, I think that the thing you got through in a captivity, not everybody could survive. So, first of all, I want to thank you for your, I think, humanity and your incredible strength. First of all, psychological strength. And I think it's a good thing to say that you have an amazing book. And it's about you being in captivity. It's Live, Fight, and Survive. And it's also in English, and you can buy it everywhere on the bookstore website. So, and that's an amazing book. And I have a good news for you. You're an incredible good writer. And another thing, I'm so sorry that you got through all of this and all that happened to you. So let's explain to our viewers at the beginning. You joined Ukrainian Marines long before the full-scale invasion happened to you. What made you feel that at that moment, Ukraine's fight was your fight also?
There's a lot to unpack there. Generally, I came in 2018, so I was actually a sniper instructor with National Guard for 2 years before I joined the Marines. By 2020, I'd got married. My wife's Ukrainian. I found a home in Mariupol. My friend had worked there and said, "Did you fancy?" I wanted to change my life at the time, and my son went off to university. So I thought some of the happiest times I ever had were working with the military. I was in a position where I could change my life. So I went to Mariupol in 2018, became a instructor there for 2 years, but needed, you couldn't get a contract with National Guard because I wasn't a citizen of Ukraine. I was on just as an instructor. So by 2020, I got married. And I needed to stay in the country. So I offered to do a 3-year contract with the Marines, so I can get 3 years in the Marines and then get my citizenship. So I was able to stay in the country, which I thought was a fair exchange. And by that time, I'd had community. I'd worked in Mariupol for 2 or 3 years. I learned Suzyk first, not Ukrainian, because I'd never had any formal education in Ukrainian or Russian, come to think of it. But generally, I just listened and copied people that were around me. And by the time the full-scale invasion came, I was already 2 years, 4 rotations. I was the first foreigner to command a position on the front line with the Marines. I passed all aspects of parachute training. Got my blue beret, which in my mid-40s was quite hard. And then once you learn a language, everything opens up. So people sort of got used to me, and I wasn't just a guy from Britain, a foreigner who came here. Mariupol was essentially my home, where my family were. So it was never a choice, really. It was. I'd like to think that most people would defend their city, defend their home, defend their family from a foreign invader. So it was never a choice I had to make. It was always going to be stay with the guys I'd worked with for several years before the full-scale invasion.
Yes, and how you met the 24th of February in 2022?
I was in a forward observation point about 800 metres forward of the first line. I'd spent 2 weeks preparing for the Russian invasion. We knew it was going to happen. I was quite shocked, really, that when you spoke to most Ukrainians, it was, no, it's not going to happen. And I was thinking, well, you'd just taken Crimea and, invaded East Ukraine. It's probably going to happen, and it did. And 4 o'clock in the morning, that was it. It was up, and it was on, and we were fighting Russians.
Yes, and yeah, I just want to say to our viewers, it's not the advertising of the book. Actually, I'm just excited to read it in a good way, and in a sad way, in all the possible ways. It's a very good one, and I think, as I've told you before, the fact that I was living with understanding what you got through in my head for the last few days, I really want to say thank to you that you came here to talk about your experience, because we're going to go through it again somehow in your head, at least. Well, so you got into captivity quite soon.
Yeah, well, we held out for several weeks, and then really, after I was exchanged, I understood a little bit more. So, we were given a choice whether to surrender or try and get out. At that point in I think it was sort of around April, early April, we were in a 200-kilometre encirclement around Mariupol. I was never going to surrender because I'm British, for one thing. I'd lived here long enough to know that I didn't want to be captured. So I made the attempt to break out and get out of Mariupol, but I was captured about 2 hours outside of Mariupol, trying to break out and trying to get back to friendly lines.
Yeah, okay. And so you were... How did it happen that when you were captured by Russian forces, you were alone?
We got ambushed. We left, I think it was around April 11th, 12th, about 3 in the morning. It was dark. We'd built these vehicles that looked like Mad Max. They were steel plated, and we tried to break out, and we got ambushed on the way out. And when we were ambushed, we debussed from the vehicles, and we tried to break out away from the vehicles. And we really did. It was just a mess by then. It was still dark. We lost people in woods. Separated. I was helping someone, my injured transport officer, who was injured, had shrapnel in his leg, and he was really in a bad way. But once I made sure they were okay, I went to try and find my platoon, and that was it. They were gone. We were scattered to the four winds. So I made a choice that I was still had all my gear. My orders were to get to this location, about 130 kilometres from Mariupol, to join up with the sister unit. My orders were still that, and I tried to look for the rest of my platoon. And in that sort of around that area where I was, where I'd lost them, I was captured trying to find my platoon. And in the end, I couldn't find them. I thought, well, I know where I am. I live in Mariupol. All I need to do is just go west. So I was trying to find a route out, a point I could identify that would give me some sort of bearing of where I was, and then get out to friendly lines. And I was captured. I literally walked into a position about 30 meters away from me, where the Donetsk People's Republic, I didn't know that at the time, those separatists were there, literally waiting for me, and they fired a warning shot, and I had to make a decision. By that time, the sun had come up. There were drones everywhere. I made the right choice. I don't regret the choice I made, and I had to really make a decision whether I was going to try and break away or surrender. And at that point, they were very close to me, and I couldn't get out. No. So it was about negotiating my surrender then.
Yeah, you were trained by the British Army, which means for us that you know what captivity means, at least on paper. And when everything happened to you in reality, you were beaten, electroshocked, they tortured you physically and psychologically, and you were isolated for quite a while. Did all the trainings you had in your life before help you somehow to deal with that?
Yeah, I had resistance training some 20 years before, SEER training. It's called Survival, Evade, Resist and Escape training. In America, funny enough, in Washington State, before I went on a second deployment to Bosnia in the early 90s. I did experience that, which is a 6-week cut-down version, but I'd experienced what it was like to be captured, tortured, put in front of the camera, how to deal with that, how to survive off the land. So I'd had some sort of experience with that. But I mean, you can put that experience, but it prepared me very well. It hadn't moved on from 30 years. I understood the different stages of capture. I knew the initial capture would be the most dangerous because, it's the unpredictability of when you're captured. that's the most dangerous. So I knew exactly what I was going, and I'd lived here a very long time. I knew what to say, when to say it. I could understand a bit of the language, so that helped. If you don't understand, sit down. It could be enough to get you, a broken rib or worse. So yeah, I understood a bit of the language. I understood the culture. I understood who my enemy was, and I think that was largely a lot to do with why I survived that initial capture, and I wasn't just shot in a car park somewhere, worse paraded through on videos and that you see now, of executions and going back to your family. So I was quite lucky, and it is a lot of luck when you are in that situation. Those early stages is a lot of luck thrown in.
From your experience, what keeps a person alive in the captivity? I mean, is that somehow discipline or imagination or faith, or in your case, your past experience and that phone call of your wife that told you these three phrases? What was that? Or was that a complex?
It's everything. I was lucky enough that I had, first of all, when you're in captivity, you go through those roller coaster ride anyway. The strongest person will go up and down with emotions. You've then got the added torture, the starvation that's thrown in, which could make you tired one day, angry the next. Food becomes a commodity. You're then looking around you, who's a threat. I mean, it's a lot of things weighed up when you're captured. Probably need longer to talk about it, but to cut it down, I was lucky enough that I met people as well that picked me up when I was down. We supported each other. But really, getting back to your wife, you're still fighting. You're just fighting in a different way. You've still got to delay information. You've still got to have that in the back of your mind. You are going to break at some point. But Russians don't use torture in the way that it's portrayed in the movies. It's not what they do. What they want you to. They use torture to get you to admit to things you probably never did and places you never were. And, obviously they wanted to justify their invasion, so they were portraying me as a mercenary, a Nazi and a terrorist, which I'm neither. I never left the country, had legal status here, and I was in the military. And so I was able to argue that with them to a degree. I had to be very careful, but I was able to stick to my guns and say, no, actually, I'm a Marine. I was married to a Ukrainian. I've lived here. And over time, you realise it's going to get, the physical abuse gets a little less. But then it becomes a trial by public opinion. Then you're thrown onto Russian media long before you ever get to a court, a Russian court. So yeah, I mean, it's a lot. And then you've got to have that hope. You never should lose hope. And then that will to get back to your family, your wife, and keep going. You never know what's around the corner. So you have to keep fighting. It's just in a different way. But there's not much you can really do about when you're starved or stabbed in the leg or electrocuted. Or you just have to roll with the punches, as we say in England.
You know what struck me in the book, that when it was always almost at the beginning of you being in a captivity, and you said, if you want to kill me, do it now. Something like that, you said. And that's, I could not even close imagine that kind of a feeling. But how many times you had the feeling that you better to be killed than to live in that circumstances?
I think looking back in hindsight, I think when they mock executioned me and didn't pull the trigger was a sign that I had some value. And once you're looking for those small victories, those small goals when you're in captivity, and I think one of those, once I realised I had some value, even though I didn't really have control or know what was going on around me or what was being said or what was being bartered, I had that idea that somehow I had some value, and I put that to the test in the book. I won't spoil it, but I put that to the test and realised once I had some value that I wasn't going to get killed. Somebody was responsible for me. So I could then extend and push the boundaries with resistance inside while I was in captivity. You can't train for pain. You can mitigate it somewhat, or you can, but those goals are what you're intending to get are those goals, those small victories. So it could be a cigarette, some spring water. It could be, bartering with media to get some food. I mean, the Russians love filming me eating a burger. I mean, they didn't feed me at all. We had starvation's by far the worst torture. So, we had a little bit of bread each day. And by the time the trial came around, I was about 60 kilos. I looked like I'd been one of those prisoners in Auschwitz that had just been released. I was so skinny. I was probably 60 kilo. I normally weigh about 85, 86 kilos. So I'd lost a significant amount of weight. You could see my ribs, the pictures on the trial. I was just emaciated.
I saw them. Yeah.
So I mean, there's not much you can really do about your environment. All you can do is just keep that strong will to get back home.
Were Russians trying to erase your identity as a soldier and as a man?
More so. They had an agenda. So they're pushing the mercenary narrative, the Nazi narrative. They're selling the justification for the war. Doesn't matter that I've got a contract. They just don't like the British passport. So it didn't matter. And under the Geneva Conventions, technically, I'm a Marine, a government. I'm entitled to those protections as a prisoner of war. But they weren't interested in that. What they wanted to do was project me as a Nazi, a mercenary, and a terrorist, when really I'd never left the country I had legal status in. And literally, I was, I couldn't really do, that narrative was formed about me while I was in captivity, which is why I was so angry when I got exchanged, which is the reason why I wrote the book, because I needed to tell my side of the story, what actually happened. It was, they're doing more than that. It's not just to dehumanise you. It's really to project the narrative, the justification for the war. Look, we've got a Nazi and a mercenary and a terrorist, when really you're not. I'm not a Nazi. I'm certainly not a terrorist. I never invaded another country to topple a government. So, and that's what you've got to keep, that identity of who you are, and just hope that everybody who watches the Russian propaganda it knows who you are, which generally they do. They know you're going to be tortured. They know that anything you say is under duress. So, my family and everybody was strong. When I got out, I got a million messages. We don't believe him. We're glad you're out. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, Shaun, speaking about Russian propaganda, millions of people saw that Russian propaganda videos with you, definitely staged, edited, meant to humiliate. And could you tell us, please, what was behind the scene? How did they force you to admit things you have never done and had nothing to do with you?
Well, first of all, I mean, the first thing to do is initialise you. They torture you. This is the worst it's going to be. They're going to electrocute you, stab you. They're going to beat you daily, stick you in an isolation cell, not let you get any sleep, make you sign confessions, and then they're going to do all the nasty stuff. When I got my indictment papers, it said I was in court and on the Russian system from about the 18th and 19th of April. I was captured on the 13th of April. For those days, they were deciding what to do with me. And that was where I was at the black site, going through all those interrogations, the electrocutions on the ear, the starvation, the isolation cell, the threats we're going to kill you, until at some point somebody said, well, we're going to put him on trial. So they could have done anything to me, but somewhere along the line, I had some value. They wanted to exchange me. And
for Medvedchuk.
For Medvedchuk. I think we got a good deal, actually. We got 150 Ukrainians out for Viktor Medvedchuk and 55 Russian officers. So in the end of the day, they wanted some people. And that's the only reason I'm alive, is because they wanted Viktor Medvedchuk. So I had no doubt they would have shot me at some point if they didn't think they could get Viktor Medvedchuk.
But you never told them on camera things that they wanted you to say.
It was weird. The questioning wasn't the tactical question I thought would come. Like I said, they're pushing a narrative. What they want you to say is that, they want to tell people that you are a Nazi. So in captivity, if you hold your ground a bit, and if you don't cave in and you take the knocks, eventually they just sort of give up with you. They're pushing that narrative. They're not going to beat you down. It's not like the movies where they say, tell us what you know, electrocute you, because it doesn't work. I mean, if their line of questioning was, you work with Elvis, I'm probably going to tell them if they're electrocuted, yeah, I've seen him, he works with me every day. it just doesn't work. But what they want you to do is torture you enough that you eventually you just go, yeah, I'm a Nazi, I'm a mercenary, I'm a terrorist. And that's what they want to do, because then you're in the system. And then you're just going to, they don't exchange you, go to Gulag for 20 minutes, or they're going to shoot you.
But that's not happened to you.
No responsibility. No, because they wanted someone. And that's it. That's the only difference. We've still got guys who weren't born in Ukraine in captivity now. But they're not getting the same where they are. Why they're not being exchanged, who knows?
Who knows, yes. Well, I was reading that they were making a scene when you were eating on cameras. Is that true?
Oh, yeah.
Because actually the only food you had was a dirty water and bread.
Yeah.
Nothing else for months. So
we were really quick to understand that once I realised I had some value, if they wanted an interview, I became, if I wanted a cigarette, I could get it. Or and I'd try my arm and get a burger. And they'd film me, look, we're treating him, look, we're giving him a burger. And the fact that I looked like so skinny by the time I got to trial, even though they filmed me eating a burger, it was just like back to the same people that were beating you in the black site, which is, for those that don't know, black site is an area or a filtration camp that you don't know where it is. It's underground, you don't know where you are. It's off the record, it's off the books. So the same people that were doing the camera work were behind the camera, were the guys beating me in the black site. So you couldn't, because if you said anything that they didn't like, they would just take you back to the black site and beat you again. So you had to be very diplomatic about how you talk to the cameras. And I'd had lots of experience with, propaganda training and talking to cameras and media work anyway. So, I had to be very careful. But when you reply to an answer, you can't, you have to be very careful about what you say, because one of the things I nearly called them was, separatist, terrorist. You can't say that, or I'm not a terrorist, because one of the questions we had was one of the interrogators came in and just sort of said, would let you ring your home, and they would tell you that my mum would tell me, we've talked to Hostage UK, and after the call, the guy would go, Hostage UK. And I said, yeah, Hostage UK. Who are they? And I don't know who they are. He said, what do they think we are? Terrorists. And you can't just say, well, I'm a hostage now. You're trying to, I'm not a POW. You're trying to exchange me. Technically, I'm a hostage now. So you have to be, and they're asking you these questions. What do they think we're terrorists? And what do I say? It's how do I get out of that? So it is. You have to be a bit diplomatic. It tests your political skills, and you have to but if you can build a rapport, and sometimes, like in the book, I said that there's some jokes about cigarettes, This guy still offers me a cigarette, and I say, yeah, I'd love a cigarette. He said, sorry, but they're like the worst Russian kind of cigarettes. And I said, I don't care. They could be from Uganda for all I know. And he tells his mate, and his mate starts laughing, You're trying to build a rapport or try and understand that you're no threat. And at some point, they made a decision that I wasn't someone who was of interest. And then eventually, they moved me to Makivka, Devet Nostra Sim, and life got a bit easier. And I was thrown in with other Westerners who were captured too.
At what moment your family, your wife, your mother, your son realized you are in a captivity? What was that, a video or?
I don't know really. Afterwards, when I got out, I started to piece things together. They were told I was dead like 3 or 4 times. They'd found my passport. Before they caught me, they found some identity documents. Because when they moved in, they went into the bases. They went into the offices in Mariupol. They pulled out all the contracts and the information. So generally, they knew who was around in that area. So they were starting to put documentation about me saying he's dead, and it was all on social media. My family was attacked on social media saying he's dead, and my nieces were attacked on there saying that he's dead. They were sending them messages through Facebook and trying to track my family down. So they thought I was dead several times before suddenly I popped up on an interview, sort of, I think it was about the 20th of April, where a very well-known Russian propagandist, not a journalist, but a Russian propagandist, was in the prosecutor's office filming me. So, straight away, they were in there with the propaganda and the trial by public opinion, like I said, long before I ever got to court.
And when you were held by its so-called Donetsk People's Republic, those, Russian-backed people, separatists, they were saying that Ukraine have fallen, that Ukraine is already under Russia, and etc. Did you have any doubts it is true, or you had this gut feeling that some intuition that they are lying?
No, I didn't. For the first 2 or 3 weeks, I didn't. There was an English guy came in, and for 2 or 3 weeks, after I was captured, there was just me and eventually a couple of Ukrainians. And the story goes is that they were making so much progress at that early stage that we had no idea if there was going to be a Ukraine. We didn't know if they were folded, they were fighting back. So for 2 or 3 weeks, the main conversation was, how am I going to get out of this? Because if there's no Ukraine, it's all going to be Russia. How am I going to get out? And then another prisoner came in next door, a guy called Paul Yuri. Unfortunately, he was beaten to death in prison. But when he first came in, he said to me, I took up...
The one with the diabetes?
Yeah, that's right, yeah. And I plucked up the courage to talk to him after a couple of days and just sort of said, hey, do you know what's going on? And he says, no, Ukraine's fighting back. He said, we sunk the Moskva. And he said, no, there's loads of guys. There's foreigners coming in, bundles of them. He said, they've stopped, they've stalled. And we were like in the cell. And there's a camera watching you in the cell. And we were in the cell. And I'll tell you what, even the goosebumps now, it sends up. Because we were like, yeah, come on. We're fighting. It's not a rollover. But for 2 or 3 weeks, we didn't know how it was. But that information was really critical to, when you're at the bottom, to pick you back up and think, we're going to get out of this. They're fighting.
And also in the book, you describe how even a glance or whisper, or even somehow a tap on the wall between cells could mean everything. What that human connection mean in the captivity?
Oh, it's massive. I mean, I write about what we call gallows humour, and literally I was on death row. So if you've got...
Oh God, we didn't say that you were on the... Yes, you were sentenced to death.
Sentenced to death, yeah.
I think that's...
I can relate to it more now than I could ever... that term gallows humour, now I was literally on death row. So the humour stayed intact. So the jokes were still there. And to the point we started to fight back against the system. We started to use the Donetsk Code of Practice, understand the law, started to fight back internally, delay court cases. We were successful in doing that. We started to fight back in captivity the only way we could. But generally, the social interaction was exceptional. I mean, just a little humour. When Brahim, the Moroccan, we went for our first shower, went upstairs, they beat us, they hooded us, threw us up the stairs, threw us into this shower. We had 15 minutes for 3 of us to have a shower, and this thing was like drip, drip, drip. And then what happened then was we got taken out, not even a towel given to us, soaking wet, hooded again, thrown down the stairs, hit with batons, thrown back into the cell, and we're sitting in the cell panting, and Brahim says, I think I'll skip the next shower day. And that humour was just there, even at the black site, which keeps you going, because you never know what's around the corner. And unfortunately, Paul Yuri was beaten to death in the cells. So, it was really important to keep that focus and that dialogue and humour. So, like I said, a tap on the window, a talk through the window, talking to a new prisoner, finding out what's going on, that's massive.
The thing, you have this thing about seeing the details in people. So you were sentenced to death and you were still noticing the accent, the shoe, I don't know, the haircut. And is that your own thing, or that what you taught for?
Well, part of it, yeah. I think there's a degree of security in the military, whatever aspect of the military are. Just some have more security and understanding the military. I'm deeply suspicious than others. But I think really, it goes back to when I used to run a pub. I used to run a pub for 2 or 3 years, and I really enjoyed it. But it made me the best social profiler. That should be in my next job, to be honest, because when you see someone come through the door, you're thinking, are they going to spend money or are they going to give me trouble? And generally the different characters in that pub, you could go to another pub and they would be the same characters, just different faces. And then you get really good at understanding these different types of, that doesn't change even in captivity. Even noticing things like if the floors were shiny like in here and the boots were shiny, there was structure. It meant I wasn't likely going to get killed there. But if somebody would pick me up with dirty, muddy boots and look like they've just come off the front line, because all I can see is this sort of area in front of me because I've had a hood on most of the time. So I was assessing the situation of what I could hear and what I could see. And generally I was starting to pick up what was good and what was bad. Your whole life just becomes about sound, because when you're not in an isolation cell or a cell underground, everything comes about pattern of life, normality, and you identify the abnormal in the normal, which instinctively happens when you're in that environment anyway. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So you're looking, for example, they would play death metal. It was only the second prison they played ABBA. I mean, that was just dreadful. But they played death metal on repeat, and it was on a loop. And I could work out the time of the day by how many songs, and it would say it was 17 songs and then 3 minutes a song. I could work out roughly how long the play list was. So when it repeated, I understood how many hours had gone past. And when it stopped, we knew people were coming in or being taken out. So you start to get used to that pattern of life, and it all becomes about hearing because you can't see anything. So you start to understand what's going on around you just by listening day in, day out. You've got nothing else to do.
How are you reacting right now, at this period of life, now, when you hear such music like Eye of a Tiger?
Jokingly, I mean, Cher was one that was played at Makivka all the time, 3 times, 4 times a day. Do you believe in life after love? And now every time I hear that, it's like, do you want me to turn it off? My wife says, and I'm like, no, keep it on. It's like, and my friend, we heard it so many times. Dylan, who was captive with me, sort of said, well, do you? And I was like, what? He said, believe in life after love. And I was like, shut up, Dylan. You know, it's like, so the camaraderie and the humour was there. But I mean, that stuff's going to be with you forever. When I got home to England, it said, British prisoner Shaun Pinner makes it home, death by ABBA. You know, it was like the headline. And I was like, oh, it just wasn't like that. But they picked up on one thing, you know, ABBA. But yeah, I mean, it's just, you know, those sorts of, you've got to remember it's the way of dealing with it, those humorous moments, to try and you deal with it better when you look at things in a different way. And I think generally soldiers have that. It's the best humour in the world because they make light of some of the darkest things.
You recently won a landmark court case in Kyiv, one of its kind. Could you please tell us more about it? Yeah. I was approached by a big lawyers in London and said, would you be interested in really what would be a landmark case of taking a state to court for their actions? And I said, yes, obviously. First of all, I said, how much is it going to cost me? And they said, no, we'll do it pro bono. I said, yes, obviously, I'm going to say. But the bigger picture is, if we're successful in taking Russia to court, then, which we have done, we've got the verdict here, but we're now looking to enforce that verdict in the UK, which means we can then go after Russian assets. And if we do get that enforcement in the UK, we then can open the door up for anybody affected by Russian aggression to then make a claim against Russia. So it is something new. It is never been done. There's no pathway to doing that. But, you know, we've got very good lawyers looking at that because all my stuff was documented by the Russians. So it's not like I've made it up. I mean, they've put it out there. They love video and everything. I know my torture videos out there because they showed me it. So eventually, you know, maybe someone's got it somewhere already. I don't know. But all the propaganda, all the courts, the sham courts, all the interviews, Russians put it out there. So we're able to get a great timeline from my medical records to the injuries that are done, the photographs of the injuries that were done, through to the breaking of the Geneva Conventions, through to, I mean, it just keeps going. It just keeps going. So there is a case, and we got the verdict here in Kiev, and now we're just waiting to go to the UK courts to enforce it, which would be great if we win. Yeah. Do you believe that the accountability will ever reach to those who gave the orders?
For some, I keep telling people it's not going to be straight away, but it will do. If Russia has to come back into the real world, it's going to have to settle these lawsuits, which is why we're putting it in the first place. So they are going to have to settle these lawsuits, and then look at I can't remember his name, Mladic. I can't remember
Milosevic.
Yeah, Milosevic. Look at they do come. It does come around. If we can seize their assets, that's even better. We can start getting money for people who have had. It's not going to replace people or property or lives, but some people have lost everything.
Yeah.
So, including me, my house was in Mariupol. I can't go back and get my house. I got the death penalty if I set foot in Russia, and they're going to sit me in a gulag for the rest of my life. So they've stolen my house, my community, destroyed my life. We deserve some recompense for that. And also, then on top of that, the way we were treated, electrocuted, stabbed, starved, thrown into the judicial system with sham trials. And yes, they did exchange me, yes, but that was only for Viktor Medvedchuk. It wasn't anything out of the good graces of their heart. They just wanted somebody in return. So, we want justice, and that's what it's all about, is getting justice for all those people that have lost everything.
Yes. Actually, last year I had a meeting with people from the criminal court from the former Yugoslavia, and after the war, people still await any information about the soldiers who killed their whole families. And they still calling to the court, to the prosecutors, asking what happened. Are there any news? And actually, lots of. It's a very complicated process, from what I understood. And sometimes those soldiers, they're changing everything. They're doing plastic surgery. That what they told the prosecutor. They're changing their identity and everything. So, but. There are some success, but it's just super rare thing.
Yeah, it's gonna be. You're not gonna get everybody because of the. For one thing, the front lines move back and forth. You're never going to get closure on some cases, unfortunately. It's too big, and this war's been going on for too long. So, but we will get, some people.
Our viewers don't know, but we met at the. Conference, Vladimir Putin Dufakov. And
can you say that? I wasn't sure you could say that. Yeah, VPDFR.
Well, it maybe once, maybe a few times. So you cannot imagine how many times John Sweeney said that during our recording duty.
Really?
Recording duty. Yes, he knows that. So basically, yeah, and that was he asked on the stage the question to all the people who were presented there, what do you see the end for? How do you see the end for Putin? And how do you see the end for Putin? To be honest,
it's difficult. Dare I say there's a whiff of positivity now because we can see the Russians suffering. We can see the fuel crisis. We can see it's not where we want it, but. If you go back to when we had the year-long ammunition drought, where we didn't even know there was going to be a Ukraine by, I think it was last summer, it's definitely changed. We're not at that place. Now we're talking about tomahawks. Now we're looking at Ukraine actually being trusted to have that weaponry. This is a massive step. You think back to January where Trump was trying to solve this in 24 hours and blaming Zelensky for the war, and what a U-turn in 6 months. What's happened? There's a lot of support in America. It's not what people think. There's a lot of support in America. I think a lot of people are telling him it's not what you think. Putin has not achieved his goals in nearly 4 years of fighting. None of his original principles. So essentially, he's stuck. This is only going to go bad for Putin unless he comes to the table, which he could very well be doing now that tomahawks are being mentioned. So otherwise, if economically Russia collapses, he's just going to go the same way as probably Gorbachev. Suddenly he'll be removed. Suddenly he'll be in a rehabilitation on a holiday under house arrest or something, and then we'll have a quick succession like we did then. I'm 52. I remember all this from before, you know, the collapse of the Soviet Union. So they've done it before. They've got pedigree. There's no reason why, you know, if Russia collapses economically, we could end up going back into the occupied territories without a shot being fired. We could actually, you know, go back into Mariupol in theory if it collapses. I think we're a way off that yet, but I think it's never been more obvious that how fragile Russia is. I think Ukraine has pretty much showed the world how Russia is not the second most powerful army in the world. The size of Russia is its Achilles heel. They're now hitting refineries all over the place. So, you know, I think, you know, it's a difficult one to call, but dare I say it, I think we're a lot better positioned than we were probably a year and a half ago.
Shaun, do you think with the Tomahawks, we may destroy energy system in Russia? As Ukrainian president said earlier that we may create blackouts in Moscow as well they are creating blackouts in Ukraine.
I think Ukraine will use these weapons conservatively because they don't have enough of them to be able to do what Putin is doing in Ukraine. So they're going to hit military targets.
Don't have them at all.
Exactly. So anything we do get has to be used effectively. And then you've got the developments and innovations that Ukraine's making itself. You know, flamingos and drones. And, you know, these weapons are just more accurate, fly lower, faster, and cover more distance. So, and you know, essentially, you've got to remember this was a 3-day war for Russia.
Yeah.
Now we're into a 4th year, and economically they're teetering. Essentially, they're only taking a few hundred meters here every other day. So you know, I think there's a lot of you can take a lot of comfort in the fact that, you know, the Ukrainian military are holding. It's not we don't have the tools to be able to go to take Crimea or take back Mariupol. So we're fighting in the only way we can. And unfortunately, I think the Polish foreign minister said today it could go on for another 2 or 3 years. And I've been an advocate of that all along. I don't think it's going to end. I said in February, don't get too optimistic about peace. Putin doesn't want peace. And I think we could be going for another 2 or 3 years.
Yes. What was the most hardest thing when you were released? Was that, I don't know, sleep, noise, trust, or just people around you who have no idea what you got through?
I slept like a baby as soon as I got back. Never had flashback, don't have PTSD. A lot of it's to do with age, I think, and experience, life experience. Good. I'd had training, I'd 13 years in the military, 9 of those learning how to fight Russians. And doing all those courses, it wasn't new. I knew if I was captured what I was going into. I didn't go, you know, I'd been in the country long enough. I knew what would happen. It wasn't going to be the Ritz-Carlton. I was going to go through all that. So I'd expected, and I pretty much prepared myself for that. But yeah, I mean, it's you give it to what happened to me to a 19-year-old in Mariupol. I would say half of my platoon, that was their first operation. Some of those kids are never going to come back from that. So they're going to need a lot of support when this war does end and when they are exchanged back. For me, I get to tell the story, which many of my friends died in Mariupol or are still in captivity. You know, and I think there's a lot to do with being stubbornness and an obligation to tell people what happened in Mariupol. For example, you know, saving the Russian speakers. Well, my family predominantly were Russian first language Russian speakers, Ukrainians. I lived in an area predominantly which was, I would say, was full of Russian-speaking Ukrainians. So he didn't save us or my family or my community. I was living in Mariupol. You know, he stole my house, destroyed the city. So I'm able to fight those narratives as a Russian-speaking Ukrainian that was just born in London, if you get my drift. So, I mean, the only country I've ever been persecuted by for speaking Russian is by Russia. You know, I still talk Russian now in Dnipro. I don't get jailed for it. So I'm spending every day fighting these narratives, still fighting with Western media sometimes about them calling me a mercenary until I write to them saying, do you realise you're pushing a Russian narrative there? I'm not. I'm a Ukrainian Marine. doesn't matter where I'm from. You know, you need to call me a Ukrainian Marine, you know, not a foreign defender, a foreign fighter. I'm not. I've lived here all my life. Lived here since 2018.
Yeah.
So, you know, we're constantly fighting these narratives, and that's what we're still doing three and a half years in.
Do Russians threaten you after you released the book?
I don't get through a day without, we should have killed you in Donetsk, or you're a Nazi mercenary on social media. Oh, every day.
How they are trying to get in touch with you? Social media?
All on social media, because I'm quite, I mean, I can't go and do what I did before. I'm 52 now. I've got so many injuries with my back and shoulder. I was blown up in Mariupol by a train IED, so I have to wear glasses now. Can't see properly out my right eye. So it's not like I can go back and do what I was doing before. Plus, with the court case and everything, I can do more damage now outside and pushing, supporting Ukraine from the outside than I could ever do in a trench or the front line anyway. So yeah, I mean, they contact me every day. And the more high profile I've become, because we're trying to arrange a trip to America in spring, the more high profile I've become, the more out there the higher echelons, like the come after me on social media, you know, or have something to say. And it's just going to get worse. So they're going to come after me. The more, like I said, the book's now, the screenplay's been written. It could be made into a film. So I guess that's going to put me at another level. I do more TV, more media now, wherever I can. So I get a lot of stick on social media because I'm really trying to fight those narratives. Like, you know, we're all Nazis. No, we're not. It's not like Brandenburg in Mariupol. We're not all Nazis. And, you know, it's not like that at all. So it's an obligation to really fight those narratives now that had some sort of success over, you know, the last 3 or 4 years. But I think people are starting to understand there's more fight on social media now about those narratives.
Yes. Well, I've heard the thought from the Ukrainian soldier who came back from the Russian captivity. He said that it's not a very right thing to tell about the captivity because it may harm those people who's still in the captivity. What do you think about that?
It is. It is. Excuse me. It is a question. Yeah. Well, very diplomatic about what I say. Most of they put out the propaganda in the first place. They put out the videos. They've put out the narratives. They've put out so all the videos and all the things we use to identify them as torturing and executing is already being put out by them. It's not anything I'm doing. It's their videos quite often I'm using of them executing prisoners or beating or torturing them. So it's not anything that I could do. Plus, they're already going through that system there anyway. The reason that I had to change the names in the book was to protect the guys that were still in captivity. So we do make precautions, but a lot of this, the bad stuff that they're doing, they put out themselves.
What can you tell about the difference between how Russians treat Ukrainian soldiers and, you know, those who they captured in Ukraine in captivity, and how Ukrainian army treated Russians?
Once they realised after 2 or 3 months that I learned, I kept it to myself that I could speak a bit of Russian. And once they learned, it did put me on another pedestal. And they were saying stupid things like, so you married a Ukrainian, so if we found you a good Russian woman, would you come and fight for us? And I'd be like, no, it doesn't work. Like, I want to go to see my wife. I want to go back to my wife, and my mum would kill me, you know. So like they would try that on all the time on interviews and things like that. And you know, like I said, over time it does get a bit easier because you have some value. Suddenly someone's responsible for you. Suddenly you're going to be swapped for Victor Medvedchuk. And then suddenly nothing, you know, nobody's allowed to touch you. So it does get a bit easier, but no, I don't. At those early stages, we're not treated any different. Ukrainians get it a hard time. The ones I was with were getting it the same as me. I was in a cell with a train driver from Mariupol, 19-year-old, who was just getting the same treatment I was. And he was nothing to do with the military. So, you know, that should tell you everything.
Shaun, time flies speaking with you and listening to you. Thank you so much for your courage, for your insight, for your honesty. And we will wait for if somehow the movie comes up. I wish all the story will be on screen someday. And the more people will see it, the better.
Oh, I hope so too, yeah. We can only hope. We can only hope.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.